we applaud you for your titles, because like there's some shows where they could be amazing, but because we have that snap decision, we're like, oh, we can't see that. That's a very simple show. We only have time to see one or the other. And so Unrepentant Necrophile, like,
that was like immediately like, gotta see that one.
Yeah, that was like top of the must-watch list.
Which is useful for Fringe because you gotta draw people in on like a flyer most of the time. So yeah.
Or get them to avoid you on the basis of a flyer, which this title does both those things.
And it has a content.
Yeah. It self-selects the audience for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And we think we present what we promise.
We are rambling. We will talk for hours about ourselves. Do not let us do that. We are so vain. We have what we call our Take 5. We've actually, at first we were doing it at the end of our interviews, kind of as like a button up to what we were talking about. But we actually found that a lot of people had so many deep answers that we're going to start it in the beginning, like we did for a previous interview. So we'll see how it goes, and then we'll have more questions as we go along. We're very informal around here because it's just the two of us. It's run and gun kind of theater reviewing. Is that a thing? It's a thing now.
Oh, kitty.
Oh. Our first question would be, we have 3 cats. We're addicted to cats. Our first question would be, what turns you on about theater?
I would say the immediacy of it. There's a relationship going on. We all, when we're in the rehearsal process, and you know, we're bouncing things off of each other, and you know, and our standards are very high, and we know that the other person is also, like, we're on the same team where we're going for, like, you know, not perfection, but because nothing's perfect, but the audience is the last ingredient in the pie. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that immediate relationship. That's what I love about theater. Yeah.
Yeah, I probably have a similar sentiments in that I kind of discovered theater through film. I ended up going to the University of Minnesota for theater, ultimately to like meet all the actors in the program and to put them in my films. But then I never ended up making a film. I ended up just doing theater the whole time. So, and I think what kind of kept me there was like the immediate reward of it. I did a lot of comedic improv early on, like performed a lot of it, like early, like in the early years I was doing that, like, you know, 3-4 times a week essentially, just for that kind of fix of like, okay, I'm in front of a crowd and getting that immediate feedback. So
yeah, I did something similar. I'm a screenwriter, kind of trained screenwriter, and I started doing theater because I met Ricky, and then we started doing theater reviews, and it just felt like you had more of a connection with people than I did sitting behind my computer that was just killing me, that is just like me and my computer. What turns you off about theater?
The accessibility for me. I don't feel like it's as accessible through price, location, all of these things. And so I think that's something that we really strive for. We want affordable theater, that a high quality theater that no matter your income level, you could you're not gonna break the bank on a night of communal art.
Yeah.
I think at the beginning, when I had a pretty narrow view of what theater was, when I was kind of like confined to a very like theater is box set realism plays where everything has a unity of time and place and action essentially. I kind of found that a very limiting form of writing, but just strictly because it had those confines that you had to, you couldn't, you had to have a confined location, confined cast of characters, that sort of thing. So I, felt that like it was kind of a confined form from a writer's perspective, but then kind of in the physical theater form, but probably about halfway or, a quarter of the way through the career, that really opened it up and realized like, oh, you can create theatrical pieces that have as much that are as dynamic as the plot of the film, with as quick, as quick of scenes, as quick of shifts of location, and and as abstract as the most experimental films as well. So that was kind of what that first turned me off about the form that I've since resolved. So it's it's build the narrative and the staging all at once, and then probably refine several stagings down the line, essentially, because you're so exhausted from just navigating through the creation process. But
Our next question would be, what's a time you had a failure and what did it teach you?
I know. Have you got so many to choose from.
If we pick the same failure, I've got 3 or 4 on deck.
One that came to mind was that we created our first show in 2012. We toured it to 3 different festivals, Kansas City, Minneapolis, and Edmonton in 2013. And we were so buoyed by the success of that tour that we and on the tail of it we created Edgar Allan, and that was great. But the way the calendar works is so we were creating a new work for the Twin Cities Horror Festival, and then it was time to enter all the lotteries for the following summer's festivals in Canada, and we went all in. We were very confident, and it was hugely challenging. It was a hugely challenging tour that was about 3 months long. Like, we were on the road for 3 months with no car. We got everywhere by trains, planes, and public transportation. And it was exhilarating. It was exhausting. When things happened where we were, thousands of miles from home, like, we just had to lay down our credit card and be like, show must go on, fix it. And I think what we learned from that was to ask for help. I think we've gotten a lot better at asking for help. Being like, hey, this is happening. Can someone give us advice? Can someone help us? And because that was actually what a lot of friends who had done the Fringe Festival circuit more than us, they were like, why didn't you say something? And we were like, we don't know. Good. because we thought that, because we're Americans and we thought that this was how we had to deal with it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Canadians are like, how can we help?
Ask for help.
Ask for help. Yeah. So, yeah, ask for help. Oh my gosh, and it saved us so many times now. So,
The 2014 tour was particularly difficult. But we also, it's interesting with our model, oftentimes, like, because we'll do a show, we usually, all of our shows have premiered at the Twin Cities Horror Festival, and then we've toured them for years afterwards, basically. So, like, they get, new life multiple times a year, like new stagings. And though our first two shows, like, were minimally tinkered with after the first few stagings, both Necrophile and the sequel to Edgar Allan both took, like, probably, like, I would say that both, like, kind of the premieres of those shows, they were not in the state that we wanted them to be. Eddie Poe more so than Necrophile, but, like, Necrophile took about probably 3 years of touring that show before the machine got really, really tight and it started, like, moving the way we wanted it to. And
we had to
so
educate ourselves on so many different things.
well, we had to learn how to play bass and electric guitar.
You learned how to, like, wire things.
Well,
like,
but, like, all this to say, like, oftentimes, and this is kind of how I've always worked, is you try to do the show that's, like, a little bit too ambitious, I guess, a little bit too far out of your wheelhouse. Like, the show, you kind of set yourself up for failure, and then you do fail, the first couple times, but you realize that the only way to get good at something, particularly in the performing arts, is to fail publicly a lot, basically. And so we've started, like, Eddie Poe, we put in a section where I have to play violin for only 30 seconds. I play violin for maybe 30 seconds. And I've been performing it for 2 years now, and it's finally maybe getting to the point where I can land it in a way that's not distracting. Like the first 5 stagings of that, it was every single day, right at the top of the show, I had to go out and embarrass myself.
oh.
But that, it puts you in that, you're immediately in the shit, and you're like, okay, I better learn how to play violin fast because I got to do this again tomorrow. And so I guess all that to say that the whole career's just one rolling failure that is slowly being, just refined here.
Canceled outright.
Yeah. But
The follow-up to that is, like, what's a success you had and what did it teach you? So that one's a little bit brighter, but sometimes harder to answer because I don't know why we fear our own success sometimes.
Honestly, I wouldn't. I love making work the way we do. I think what we have to say is important because I think that what we're saying isn't something that a lot of people are saying it or how we're saying it. And I feel successful because even though I mean, yeah, I feel success in that we've just had, we're getting better and better at what we do. We're expanding our reach to new audiences while still maintaining our values for what we want to do and how we want to do it. And I think, yeah, I think that's a real strength in an industry that is often unstable. And yeah, I love being able to tell stories and create characters that I'm not going to wait around for other people to not cast me as that thing,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So yeah, that's big to me.
One of the last things we did before pandemic hit was we went to Richmond, Virginia, and performed Edgar Allan and Eddie Poe back to back at the Poe House, like the Poe Museum in
Yeah.
and it was like part of like the all-day Edgar Allan Poe birthday bash, basically. So they had acts all day and just a tent in their courtyard. And so we were kind of given the challenge of, like, we knew we'd have a audience that was keen on the material, because, you know, they were there for Poe, but also we were going to be performing our shows, which are designed to be played in theaters with, like, you know, doors that shut and lights that go out. We would be playing like just in a tent, basically.
On
like,
hay.
Yeah, on hay. With, like, you know, set that other acts are going to be using in the background, and like, and with an audience that can kind of come and go as they please. Like if they want to stay the whole time, but nothing is keeping there. And there's going to be people that are going to be popping their heads in, like, you know, in midst of it. So we didn't really know what to expect. And at this point, we had been doing Edgar Allan for 6 years, and yeah, we've been doing Edgar Allan for 6 years, and Eddie Poe for about 3, maybe a little bit less than that. And
2, yeah.
And Edgar Allan was the show that everyone liked, and Eddie Poe, it was interesting. If people who hadn't seen Edgar Allan really liked Eddie Poe, but people who saw Edgar Allan and loved it, felt, you know, like they're like, oh, I like Eddie Poe, it's just not as good as Edgar Allan, which makes a lot of sense, because that's how people, you know, consume and like things. But at the Poe House this year, like that was the first time that Eddie Poe, like, kind of, like, it became, you know, it's like we were at church, basically. Like, the audience, you know, we had, like, that one we played a little bit later. We had an audience of like 60 for that one that stayed throughout most of it, you know, or for the most part had polarity. And they were drunk, and they were, like, just, you know, talking to us as we were performing, like, you know, really getting into all the, you know, the turning points that the character had to face. And yeah, it was, it was very satisfying to be like, okay, yeah, we, like, that is a difficult performance to do, and a potentially, like, a potentially hostile crowd, just because they're drunk and in a tent.
And I don't have I'm not from Virginia, and so my Virginia accent may not be up to their standard.
Yeah.
I was very scared about that.
Yeah.
But they loved it.
Yeah,
it felt just great.
Well, it felt like the mission accomplished, of like something that was, you know, very dense and literate, but also accessible. accessible if you were looking for dense and literate, but also not inaccessible for someone who doesn't need to understand every reference, and like and something that is informal enough to fit in a tent, but also serious enough that you can get an entire tent to like get like just deathly quiet, when I pull the teeth out of my face, like yeah. So,
or when you mention very real history that we should not be that we should acknowledge fully and not be proud of, and when you can suck the air out of a tent in Richmond, Virginia, that's powerful.
Yeah. And yeah, so I guess it epitomized a lot of what I like about the craft, like going back to like what drew us in the first place. It was like, oh yeah, I think that performance epitomized like, oh, one, we're being like brought in by the authority on this subject that we've kind of become interested, of Edgar Allan Poe, that we've become interested in the last 6-7 years. And also that they, I guess, paid us what we were worth as well. Like, I think that was a big factor as well, of like, oh, good, we came and did our job very effectively, and we're paid for it, and also just got to hang out with the Edgar Allan Poe scene, which that is a subculture. Like, we've done a couple, like last year we went to his death day in Baltimore, and then his birthday in Richmond, and we're just dipping our toes into this weird subculture. But
we're taking it back from the Addams Family. The Poe Foundation has told us that that they're like, we like your work because you're actually steeped in Poe, and it's not like this weird, like, just all encompassing goth like cosplay, we're like hardcore Poe.
It was so funny. And it's, the other funny thing is, like, all the different Poe societies all like have rivalry with each other, and since we were the new kids on the block, all of them like swept over, and like, just we got a wing around us, and we're just like, hey, you don't deal with Baltimore. They're just gonna tell you all the right,
they're gonna they can't.
Don't Richmond doesn't know what they're talking about. Like, it's very, very funny.
There's so many cities in America that claim Poe. So that was it was funny to see the different contingents,
I think we have one more question, because like have we been talking a long time? Because like I feel like we talk forever.
We're doing great. You're great.
Okay. Well, we have one more like actual question, and then we can just talk about your shows and other stuff more. But our last question of the Take 5 is always, if they made a ColdHart rule in 40 years in textbooks that kids had to study, what would that rule be?
When you choose your collaborators, you should take into account both what they like and what they hate. Because I have, maybe this isn't a ColdHarts rule, but this is a devised theater rule. I've often found that if I find commonality with another collaborator based on something like a trend or a trope that I severely dislike in modern theater, or a personality type that I don't like to collaborate with, if I can find other people who also don't like that personality type, I tend to get along very well with those people. I don't know if that made sense or not.
No, you're good.
Perfect.
Well, I think maybe the ColdHarts rule, and this is like, because we've gone and taught it like colleges, and we've actually we've instructed like romantic couples that they're like, we want to do what you do, we want to make theater together. And I would say that we had to start developing rules, because with our first show, we made it in this living room, and like with all the spare time, we were researching it, practicing it, running ideas off of each other, writing it, and so the only time that we had apart was like when we were at our respective workplaces. So we did have time apart, and then but with and then Edgar Allan was a different process, and we brought in an outside eye so that we could have somebody be objective about watching us perform together, and that was huge. Where at the end of the day, it was like, I thought that the most like we were agreed on A. We were agreed on that we needed to get to C, but both of us had different ideas of what B was, how to get there. And so what was nice about having the outside eye is that we would each present B and like actually play it. And then our outside eye would say, that B works, that B does what you're trying to accomplish. It fuses A, B, and C. But then I very simply with Necrophile, we just made a rule where, because we were you have to go into you have to be obsessed with what you're working on. And the rule that we made for that was that we were not allowed to talk about the show while we were eating. And that was A, because like we wanted to keep it like gross, and we wanted to be able to eat, and we also wanted to spare, like if we were at a restaurant or something, we wanted to spare the people around us from strange staple talk. Yeah.
I think the only ColdHarts rule though is, Katie said this to a student at Southern Illinois, or no, at Central Washington University, when he asked like, how do you know when like a performance is perfect? And Katie responded to a 19-year-old like, well, I think you're perfect when you're dead.
I love that so much.
Oh, chisel that one in stone.
Most of all is like, film is ultimately canned at some point. And at that end point, it's, I have liked that process where you're like, ooh, I got this nice little like thing that never changes. But the theater, you never have that. It's always alive. It's always an experiment. And like, yeah, we'll be perfect when we're dead. So.
Hey guys, if you like what we just did, there's going to be plenty more coming up. Please like, comment, subscribe. Our Venmo is in the description. Please support us if you can. Our cats need the money.